From the innovators of Delay of Game and 2 for 2 comes a new sports talk forum, but with the same mentality, to bring you the top sports headlines in a simple way.
With Ryan Swanigan.
Turn the camera around, bend down, get next to a stuffed puppet of a raccoon and take a selfie there.
And the cows come sailing in.
That's exactly the point I'm trying to make.
Not so fast, my friend.
And Brent Bonfleur.
I have nothing against women being in sororities.
One and done, girl. That's the title of my autobiography.
Yeah, the head comb. Imagine me in a little kitty suit.
You're listening to The Route, a sports talk podcast.
Welcome in to another edition of The Route here on this Sunday, November the 8th. Already closing in on quite a few shows already, believe it or not. I think we're on our 10th podcast or whatever. We've been going a long way so far, and we're closing in up on eventually December, believe it or not. It's going to be here before you know it, and then December will soon pass, and then by then, hoping, at least I'm hoping, for the return of the Delay of Game podcast. That is not officially confirmed yet. It is still out there, but I should say Delay of Game, and it will be turned into a podcast. So the point is, though, with that, still not there yet. So sit tight, hang on, and see if it can actually happen. Speaking of shows happening, today will happen without Brent Bonfleur. He is on assignment. John Kipper is also on assignment. Michael Dixon is also on assignment. And Devin Cleach is spending time with his family. So I have literally thought of every possible person that I could get here in the studio is unavailable. Matt Rigby also on assignment. So it's almost as if I just picked a bad week or something. I don't know. There's all this stuff going on, people giving speeches, hosting stuff, orientation, all that jazz. So I have called in one of the more reliable guys that I know who isn't in the city of Lincoln where this podcast is recorded. He is in Wayne, Nebraska. His name is Doug Lowery, and he will join us in just a little bit. But first, after... this is also, I guess, a combination of the regular podcast and our Husker Football podcast as well. I should put a disclaimer with that. It's been a very challenging week for Nebraska, capped off in the most unbelievable way that really can only happen at Memorial Stadium. Huskers upsetting the 7th-ranked Michigan State Spartans, basically a top 10 team for the first time in who knows how long. It happened. So we're not ranting about that. We're ranting about something a little bit higher than that. Something that came out earlier in the week, almost a week ago from tomorrow, that I've been dying to comment on. So enough blab. Let's get to it, please.
Yes, it's time for the original Ryan's rant, but Ryan goes off on something that's more fake than fake or completely improbable. This used to air on his old show, but now he's gone from that show, so he's here on the route. And so, Ryan's rant can continue to harvest life's absurd issues that have simple solutions if logic is applied. In short, we just call this segment Ryan's Rant.
So Shawn Eichorst, the athletic director for University of Nebraska-Lincoln, published a statement earlier in the week supporting Mike Riley. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, okay? It's what's wrong with how Shawn Eichorst goes about things, that's what I have a problem with. And there's some very striking differences between how two historically tradition-rich programs are run, and the comparison I'm going to make is it's with the Huskers, a team that I'm very hard on because I love Nebraska so very much, but at the same time, I also have to be critical of them because they have to, they have to get the job done. It's almost expected at Nebraska. The team that I'm comparing the team and the organization I'm comparing Nebraska with is the Chicago Cubs. Believe it or not, it can be done. And Shawn Eichorst has a policy. He has multiple policies. One of them being which he does not comment on coaches during the middle of the season, which is fair. I understand it. That's fine. I have a problem with it. What I have a problem with is I don't know if this is a policy that he himself has established or that it's just something that he lives by or runs his office by or whatever it may be. But Shawn Eichorst only seemingly appears at the big events. When somebody's getting honored on the field, a team is getting honored on the field, there's being awards passed out. That's your stereotypical showing up to the big flashy events, and that's it. Now, I'm speaking from experience when I say that that's kind of what Shawn Eichorst does. In the first year that he was here, I saw him at a Husker softball game. I can't think of anybody that got honored that night because I know which game it was. It was against Minnesota. It was, I think, 2013, I believe. And I think at that time, Shawn Eichorst was just trying to see each team and, gauge the status of, the softball team, the baseball team, the basketball teams, wrestling, football, volleyball, etc. But Shawn Eichorst is a guy who you almost never see outside of that. Outside of that first year, ever since, you know nothing about him. He rarely does interviews. He doesn't make himself, I guess, noticeable. And in the sense, he actually does when he does appear, because then it's like, oh my gosh, there's Shawn Eichorst. We're seeing a rare thing here. So my point with that is, in comparing it to the Chicago Cubs organization, that's not how Theo Epstein and especially Tom Ricketts run the Cubs. Tom Ricketts, the owner of the Chicago Cubs, he is literally, I see this about half of the Cubs games on TV every season since he bought the team. He is sitting in the front row, a few seats away, literally about 2 or 3 seats away from the Cubs dugout. And it probably is it's probably even more than half that, in which he is sitting right by the Cubs dugout. He's walking around. He's engaging with the fans. He's talking with the fans. He's gauging interest. He's gauging what the problems are, what Cubs fans want to see. All this stuff. That's kind of the same with Theo Epstein. Although Theo, I understand, is a little bit more busy. He's got he's the general manager of the team. He's got player contracts to manage, budgets to run, a front office to take care of with Jed Hoyer. He's got that stuff. But Theo still makes time to connect with the fan base, to not make a point to have himself noticed, but you know that he's around and that he's not, for the majority of the time, hiding. Theo Epstein doesn't hide. Tom Ricketts doesn't hide from the fans, from the media. Shawn Eichorst does. For whatever reason that we don't fully know, he doesn't really, I guess, connect with the fans. And that's my issue that I have here in today's rant. It's what he wrote in his letter that really, I think, upset some of us. And I read it about 3 different times, and I couldn't really pinpoint a certain spot in his open letter to the Husker fan base and say, yes, that is where Shawn Eichorst has, he's right. He's connecting with the fans when he says that. He's never done that. And he didn't in this letter. I'm reading through it again right now. It's just like, as I said to Devin, it's like almost like a politician in Washington, D.C. trying to, tell the people of the state he's representing what's going on when he's not even there and he doesn't know what's going on. He thinks he knows, but he doesn't. While many are understandably disappointed in the current record of the football team and the heartbreakingly close losses we have suffered, I am confident the future is bright because I see it in the eyes of our players, coaches, and staff, and I am impressed by what I know is going on behind the scenes. Our coaches are developing our student athletes, and though the consistent victories are not yet there, I am confident they will come. I have witnessed how our young men battle every day in practice and fight to the finish on game days in the face of great adversity. Football can be a humbling game of inches and the seconds, and our players have laid everything on the line while making no excuses. The prospective student athletes looking to make Nebraska home possess athletic talent, academic potential, and high character, making for a bright future. That makes me immediately think of the question, how can I believe you when you say that? Because I've barely seen you at any events that happen for Nebraska. Now, lately we have seen Shawn Eichorst make appearances, and I don't know if that's because he is realizing it or somebody brought it to his attention, but the point with Eichorst in this letter is, I don't know how I can believe that when I have not really ever seen him outside of high-end events or something that's happening that requires him to be at the game. The same goes with baseball and with basketball. The incredible amount of hours they put in and the sacrifices they all make to represent Nebraska are truly remarkable. In 2 decades as a student athlete and athletics administrator, I have had the opportunity to learn and work alongside some incredible people at 5 different institutions. What the best administrators and coaches have in common is a consistent commitment to teach young minds to do things the right way and to instill a value system that emphasizes hard work, discipline, loyalty, teamwork, compassion, and excellence. Those principles, coupled with a positive attitude, generally result in championships. This is from Shawn Eichorst's open letter. Now, if you're going to throw in the 5 different institutions, 1 year at Miami I don't think counts because the only hire that Shawn Eichorst had at Miami is now gone. That's Al Golden. He was fired. So that's very hard to believe that Shawn Eichorst knows what it takes and that he has seen these things in practice. He probably has seen the games. I don't doubt that for a second. But again, in summarizing up this letter, to me, it seemed as if he was almost making he wasn't making a desperate attempt to connect with the fan base. Eichorst, yes, he was backing up Mike Riley as, it should be following a Purdue loss. But he just seemed like he was trying to calm the fan base down and tell them what's really up when you kind of really can't do that with Nebraska fans. Not because of the point that Brent Bonfleur made in a lot of Husker fan base may be delusional. It's more of the fact that when we barely see you, Shawn Eichorst, the AD of Nebraska, outside events that you're almost expected to be at, that's a problem. That's an issue. You can't really run a institution like Nebraska without connecting to the fan base. That's expected. You have to do that. You have to connect with the fans. If you can't connect with the fans, you're never going to really have anybody on your side. You're never going to have control of the minority opinion. Kind of like how it was with Bo Pelini. The minority had the louder voice when it came to Bo Pelini's status as head coach. The majority didn't really voice it that much because they didn't have a problem with it. Again, the saying goes, the minority always has the louder voice because they are fighting harder for their cause than the majority, because the majority is just fine with what they have. They're okay. There's nothing wrong in the eyes of the majority. So therefore, their fight for what they want isn't as great as the minority. So that's essentially one of the main reasons why Bo Pelini got fired. And that probably is one of the main reasons why Shawn Eichorst decided that he had to release this letter to try and calm down a very displeased fan base, and B, try to connect with that fan base. Now, again, as I said, and I pointed some parts of that letter out, that letter did not really come across as connecting with the fan base. And as I said, The Cubs have an entirely different way how they go about things. They understand. Tom Ricketts, Theo Epstein, Jed Hoyer, they all understand how crucial it is to connect with the fans. That is the most important thing to make sure you have checked off your list as an owner, as the GM, as the president of baseball operations with the Chicago Cubs. You have to connect with your fans. Engage with them. Get their opinions. Do whatever you can to make sure that they are on your side. Shawn Eichorst has not done that at Nebraska. He hasn't. And that's why it is very concerning going forward for Nebraska if Mike Riley does not end up doing what the fan base wants him to do in 3 or 4 years and no progress has been made, then there's a huge problem. Because number one, you're gonna go through another head coach. I guarantee you that. The fans won't stand for it. They're not going to sit back and let another Bill Callahan era take place. Now, do I think that will happen with Mike Riley? After last night, my thoughts are still the same. I don't believe so. But I won't be surprised if no progress is made. I really won't. But if there isn't progress made, then, as I said, Mike Riley will be gone. Shawn Eichorst will be gone. And whoever the new chancellor is at Nebraska who takes over Harvey Perlman's job, he will be faced with an enormous task of A, trying to find a trying to find an athletic director, and B, trying to find an athletic director who can hire the right head coach. All because the fan base supports the team. That is the main concept. At the end of the day, my point on this is as follows. The fans make this team. Nebraska fans make Nebraska football. Cubs fans make Cubs baseball. And if you're in charge of those organizations, you have to make sure that they are on your side. Right now, Husker fans, I think, as of this morning, they might have backed off a little bit. But I can guarantee you, coming into this game, into Saturday night's game against Michigan State, Nebraska fans were not on the side of Shawn Eichorst. They still might not be. I don't know. Things have changed in the last 24 hours. But the point is, if you can't have the fans on your side, you're going to have problems. And there are tons of organizations and programs out there that are prime examples of that. The latest addition is the University of Miami. Prior to that, Michigan football. And the list goes on and on and on. In Major League Baseball, in the NFL, in the NBA, in college basketball and football, collegiate athletics in general. You can find so many examples of that. Nebraska cannot afford to join that list. But if things don't evolve the way that Husker Nation wants it, they will join that list. And that would be really unfortunate and really tragic, not just for the state of Nebraska, but I think, on a larger sense, the state of college football.
You're listening to The Route, a sports talk podcast. Available online at theroute.wordpress.com and on YouTube. It's time now for Out of Play, the part of The Route where Ryan Swanigan and Brent Barnfloor discuss one major controversial sports story from the week.
All right, so as I mentioned, no Brent Barnfloor today, so I am bringing in somebody who actually, when we worked together, used to be the guy I would rely on all the time. In addition to John Kipper and Brent Barnfloor in, I guess, pinch situations. And he joins me now via the telephone. His name is Doug Lowery. And Doug, since I have kind of failed to, I guess, look up and keep track of where you work now, tell us where you are working, my friend.
Yeah, I work up in Wayne, Nebraska. Population like 8,500. There is a college up here, though, so I'm still a college town kid. I work up here at a radio station doing broadcast journalism that also gets sent back down to Norfolk, Nebraska, where we have our studios for News Channel Nebraska, which is one of the newer, it's probably the newest news channel started up in Nebraska. Started in October. And so just doing TV news and radio news and just being a reporter up here in Wayne.
And that's treating you rather well, I see, from time to time. You still get to do sports stuff, so that's pretty good.
I've gotten to call some 8-man football games, a couple of 11-man games. I did sideline reporting for the last home game of Wayne State's season yesterday, so good time up here, still doing sports, but also getting my news fix in.
There you go. Doug Lowery, carrying on as we expect him to do so. Interestingly enough, the Nebraska Cornhusker football team is doing the same thing, and our out-of-play discussion today isn't about the Huskers. It's actually about Greg Hardy and all of that, but we like to throw in Husker talk with Doug Lowery when we can, so we'll do that first here before we get into our actual topic for out-of-play. And, Doug, starting with Husker football, what a very, I guess, frustrating week. We had the Shawn Eichorst statement that was released on Monday after Nebraska's embarrassing loss to Purdue. You say that is a non-story. Is there a particular reason why?
Nothing's going to happen in the middle of the season. You're not going to get rid of an AD in the middle of the season. He's got other sports he's also worrying about. If it happens, it'll happen at the end of the year. Either at the end of the football season or at the end of the calendar year. But it's just a non-story right now. It's people getting up in arms over something that's not going to be decided for a long time. Yeah, you can keep this in your memory for, if they decide to keep him and he continues to not do well or not do what people think he should do. But it's not anything, when you're talking about November 4th that you really need to worry about, because it's nothing is going to happen from it anytime in the near future, I don't think.
Moving on to yesterday's unbelievable game. Let's start with the hot topic from that game, which is the controversial call. I saw this morning on ESPNU that the rule of contact and reestablishing yourself back in play from the out-of-bounds area, I saw that explained this morning, and it does make sense once a rule is given. The explanation of the rule is given. What did you think of that, and what did you think of what happened for the Huskers last night?
First off, I just want to say none of that happens unless my boy Jordan Westerkamp, who is from my hometown, makes 2 25-plus yard catches to them that far down the field and injured himself on the second one. None of that happens unless Mr. Westerkamp is making those catches, so I just want to throw that out there. Second of all, it just showed the resiliency of the team. This is a team that never gave up, never quit fighting, and even in their losses, 4 losses on the last play of the game, they were in it till the end. They were playing till the end. They weren't blowouts. And sure, it stinks to lose that way, but eventually the cards are going to go in your favor, and the time management worked out just right. They got a pass rush at just the right time. I think there's a lot of factors that play into them having success yesterday, and it was just an overall win, because I don't think you can put it on Tommy. I don't think you can put it on Amani. You can't put it all on Jordan Westerkamp. It was an entire team win that it took yesterday, and it was just good to see, sitting there watching Mike Riley in the post-game interview on ESPN was just like, you just want to hug him. Like, you just feel like, he's tried so hard and he's trying to do it the right way, and finally he gets this result. And I think a lot of people don't understand how big of a deal this is, because we're in Nebraska, right? We're supposed to be this great team, and like, oh man, we've got these undefeated seasons in the 90s, and everyone's upset because we're not, going to be 9-win team this year. But for a team that is was 2-6, 3-6,
yeah, 3-6,
3-6 going into that game, to beat number 7 in the country. I mean, like, I know we're not used to being the team that's 3-6, but that's a big deal. Like, that is really, really impressive and really, really cool. And I think that's kind of what this team is going to relish in. I mean, they get a chance to be the spoiler for Iowa at the end of the season. And that is like, you don't have a lot to play for. Sure, they're probably going to beat Rutgers, and if they beat Iowa, they're in bowl eligibility. But they also get the chance to say, no, you're not going to go to the college playoff. No, that's not going to happen on our watch. You're not going to come into our town, into our stadium, and make that happen. So, I mean, it's just a very cool thing going on right now, turning what was a pretty pitiful season into something at least watchable and with some degree of interest.
Do you think that, I mean, Nebraska has, obviously, as you said, it's been a season to forget, one of the worst in quite some time. Do you think there's still something for Nebraska to play for other than the possible chance to still end up getting into a bowl game? I mean, is there play as the team that could be the wrecking ball for the Iowa Hawkeyes? I mean, is that really what's left?
That's exactly what I said, man, and I believe it. I think that's motivation, if anything, is motivation. They're a team that, they're not only is it the neighboring states, not only is it the biggest, rivalry that they have currently in the Big Ten, unless you consider Wisconsin, which, me and you do for sure, but a lot of people consider Iowa because of the proximity of the two states and the proximity of fan bases. It's one of those things where they're going to come in most likely unbeaten, and Mike Riley and the Nebraska Cornhuskers have a chance to send them out, licking their wounds.
Going to this Rutgers game that's upcoming for this weekend, we saw Nebraska go into Purdue. Everybody's thinking, oh, well, Nebraska, they'll go in, they'll be fine, we'll move on. And 55-45 Purdue comes out, and the rest is history. Is Rutgers a trap game again like Purdue for the Huskers?
I think this is the perfect instance of coaching, and why you make this coaching change is, if this was still Bo Pelini, I would say, this team's riding the high. They're not going to try that hard. They know it's just Rutgers. But I think with a guy like Mike Riley, who knows better, who's been around the block, and I think this is the moment where we say, if we can go in there and just stomp on the Scarlet Knights a little bit, we'll know that Mike Riley's the real deal. We'll know that he's got this team working the way he wants it to work. Because if they come out and lay an egg, they didn't give a darn in practice. That's what I think this weekend is the barometer of the Mike Riley effect for Nebraska athletes. Because if they go out there and lay an egg, it just shows that he wasn't on them hard enough after a big win. Whereas if they go out there and they perform well, it's like, okay, they got the needle pointing in the right direction, and Riley's keeping it going.
Doug Lowery of News Channel Nebraska joining us, formerly of 90.3 KRNU in Lincoln. So now, Doug, switching from one lovable coach to another, and Tim Miles and your boys at the Nebraska basketball program, this is the first time that we've had a chance to talk about Nebraska men's basketball on this show to this point. Yeah, I know. For you, it's been a while.
Yeah.
I've got to start with the schedule and really the strength of the non-conference schedule. And I think a lot of Husker fans thought that, well, maybe next year it will be a little bit stronger non-conference schedule. And honestly, when it came out, this is at least for me, I don't know what you think, but for me, when the non-conference schedule came out, I looked at this and said there is one section of this schedule that is really good outside of a game against Villanova. Everything else on there looked very, very weak. Do you agree? Do you agree with that?
I agree, but I think it's a good thing. I mean, if you consider that this team has 3 upperclassmen on it, 3 out of, 12 or 13 guys, that means 10 guys are underclassmen or true freshmen. You got Benny Parker, you got Siobhan Shields, and you have, Ty Webster. And that's about, Andrew White III sat out a year, but I think he's going to be playing as a redshirt sophomore, if I'm not mistaken.
Junior.
Well.
Redshirt junior, that's what he's listed.
Are you sure?
Yes.
All right.
I'm looking at it right now.
You got 3 guys that have been in the program and played a game for Nebraska starting the season. You have 5 freshmen that are going to be playing this year. I am totally okay with a weak non-conference schedule because, as we know and as we've seen, the Big Ten schedule, the Big Ten slate, the conference play is a monster.
Mm-hmm.
It is really, really rough on teams, and if you're not too beaten up by the time you get there, it's all the better. And so to get this team's, the wheels moving, the engine churning, if they have to play some crummy teams in the start and just, win close games versus mediocre teams to get the team gelling together, because you got to remember too, there's not a true center on this team. There's not. Ed Moreau, who plays a better, 5, is shorter than Jacob Hammond. And Hammond, unless he hit the weight room in the past week, is still not bulky enough to play true center in the Big Ten. And so, it's just they're going to play as a small team. They're going to have to figure out how to win as a small team. Golden State just did it, so I'm not predicting that by any means, but it's possible to do. It's going to be tough, and I have no problem with a pancake schedule kind of at the start there.
Going into the games that Nebraska has, I mentioned they play Villanova. They play a very nice series during Thanksgiving weekend, taking on Cincinnati, and then either Tennessee or George Washington. And then they come back to Pinnacle Bank Arena and they host Miami. Then outside of those games, not really a lot of interesting, intriguing matchups.
Right. There's a lot of teams that have a direction and a state in them, or a tech in them. So it's like a Northwest something state or a Southwest something tech.
Yeah.
A lot of those.
Mississippi Valley State, Delaware State, Southeastern Louisiana, Arkansas Pine Bluff, Abilene Christian. The game against Rhode Island after Creighton, could that be something really interesting to keep an eye on for Nebraska? Could that be kind of the indicator how the rest of the season could go?
I think every single game is going to be an indicator of how the rest of the season can go, because you get one injury to one key player and this season could be in the tank. If Siobhan goes down for whatever reason, if Benny goes down for whatever reason, I just don't think you can depend on, the depth isn't there. It's a lot like looking at, maybe the defense, the linebackers and the defensive backs for the Husker football team. It's just like, if one guy goes down, who do we put in? It's just not there. But yeah, I think Rhode Island, again, towards the end of the non-conference and a game where they should be firing on all cylinders will be a great barometer. I agree with you on that, though.
Going into the Big Ten schedule here before we take a look at Nebraska's roster, Doug Lowery joining us. I really actually like this schedule. It's got a nice mix of different teams in different locations. But from what I'm looking at, it really, Doug, kind of favors Nebraska a little bit because, yes, they have to go on the road to Michigan State and to Wisconsin, and Indiana as well. But they get Indiana also at home. They get Minnesota at home. They get Michigan, Maryland, Ohio State, Purdue. They're all at home, and they also have to go to Purdue as well. What do you think of this Big Ten schedule?
It's a Big Ten schedule, and it's not going to be an easy one, but they do get some of their tough games at home. They get to see a lot of teams home and away it's going to be good to at least try to go 1-1 in the series. So it's a tough schedule. It's not going to be easy. This could be a year where it's teaching the young guys what Big Ten ball is like, because it's a hard transition. I know Ed Moreau went to Simeon. I think Glenn Watson went to St. Joseph and won a state championship there. Both very good powerhouse schools out of probably the best basketball city in the country. It's tough, though, and to get a team playing at a high level in the Big Ten, it's tough, and it's tough especially without a true center and without a point guard with some size. I know Glenn Watson's 6'2", that might, but you see a guy like Melo Trimble come in from Maryland, 6'4", built, can shoot, can drive. I mean, there's all across the Big Ten. There's just these great teams with these great rosters. It's a good schedule, though. I mean, as far as the Big Ten goes, it's never going to be an easy schedule. That's for sure. So it'll be interesting to see how it all turns out. But yeah, I mean, I like the schedule, and I think there are times where Tim Miles kind of wishes that he could play some of the Big 12 teams at the bottom of the Big 12. But it is what it is, and we get to play some Big Ten basketball, and hopefully this team will be firing on all cylinders by the time they get there, and it'll be interesting to see what they have, because, man, that Big Ten schedule is going to be no joke.
Yeah, I definitely agree. You mentioned Glenn Watson, Ed Morrow, two of the new freshmen on this basketball team for Tim Miles. With the addition of guys like Jack McVay, Andrew White III coming back, he's a dangerous guy both inside the paint and beyond the arc. I mean, we know that the chemistry is going to take some time to build. You've got Anton Gill, who's going to be joining the Huskers for next season, the 2016-2017 season. When it comes to expectations, and I have mentioned this a lot with Husker football, especially 2 weeks ago, you kind of have to drop them almost in the first year because it's a rebuilding year. Would you consider that to be kind of the same case for Nebraska basketball this year, to maybe drop your expectations and just see how things unfold, see the chemistry that's built, the teamwork that's there, the experience that's gained?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? 2 years ago, the expectations around the team were, we have these transfers, they're going to get to play this year. This Cutaway kid might be pretty good. I don't know a lot about the team. All of a sudden, they're in the NCAA tournament, and your expectation is the next year with all those guys coming back is, holy cow, this team is going to be great. I can't wait to watch Nebraska basketball, and they lay eggs all the way throughout the season. So I would say go back to what you did 2 years ago and just don't have expectations. Say, all right, it's interesting. This Moreau kid could be pretty good. I think Glenn Watson's got a chance. Siobhan's in his senior year. I love watching Benny Parker. Just go and say, this is a neat team. Let's see what they can do. And, you got to realize they're undersized. They're young. And Tim Miles, while he is, has proven to be a magician in his career in making teams work and making successful programs, it might take one more recruiting class to get where he needs to go. It's going to be an interesting year, though, for sure, with this roster and with this team. And so I would say the expectation should be, don't really have an expectation. Just go and enjoy some basketball, because it's, we're at a pretty pristine arena. I don't know if you guys, if listeners understand that fully. I remember vividly the video on Nebraska Huskers YouTube with Dwayne Wade, and he says, "You guys don't get it. I've never had it this good, and I play in Miami. Like, I play for a pro team in Miami. I don't have it as good as you guys have it facilities-wise." So, just enjoy what we have. It's always a good night to go down to the Pinnacle Bank Arena and watch a game. Win, lose, or draw, hopefully this team will be fun to watch and not as aggravating. A little bit more. It sounds like from practice they're a little bit more willing to pass the ball than some, prior players who like to put up some shots. So it'll be interesting. But I think keep the expectations to a minimum and just enjoy some basketball.
Fair enough. Doug Lowery, this guy is always great to talk to when it comes to Nebraska men's basketball. We do know that you can get fired up about things, especially things that are rather ridiculous in the world of sports, and we saw this a lot last year with the Ray Rice situation. And now, once again, another similar incident has come about, although this incident happened about I don't know, maybe
It happened a year and a half ago. Me and John Kipper were doing our summer show on ARNU when it happened.
All right. And just on Thursday, finally, the photos of that incident between Greg Hardy and his girlfriend were released, and the unfortunate damage, I guess, that was done to Greg Hardy's girlfriend at the time. And, I mean, there's a lot of things that have come from this, Doug. Jerry Jones mainly releasing a statement saying, and I quote, "While we did not have access to the photos that became public today, on Thursday, we were and are aware of the serious nature of this incident. We, as an organization, take this very seriously. We do not condone domestic violence. We entered into the agreement with Greg fully understanding that there would be scrutiny and criticism. We have given Greg a second chance. He is a member of our team and someone who is grateful for the opportunity he has been given to move forward with his life and his career." My first question to you, Doug, is does Jerry Jones really fully understand the severity of the situation regarding Greg Hardy like the Ravens organization did, or is he really just thinking about making sure that his football team is the best that it can be?
Here's the point I'm going to make about this, and it's not going to sound like the popular opinion, and I'm not going to sound fired up about it. I talked about this on the radio, me and John did, a year and a half ago, and we talked about how absolutely ridiculous it was that this man, I mean, and if you know who Greg Hardy is and you've seen it, like he's a large man, he plays defensive line. He can, probably lift a bunch of weight. When they say he was throwing his girlfriend around, I didn't imagine like a pillow fight. I imagined some pretty violent acts. They said he threw her by her throat. He choke-slammed her onto a bed of assault rifles. All right, now, maybe I'm a more imaginative thinker, but when I hear those things, I don't think, oh, she walked out without a bump on her head. Like, I figured she was a pretty battered-up person when this happened, and it didn't take pictures for me to realize that was the case. Now, if there's people out there who want to say, oh, well, the pictures make it so much worse, that's not Greg Hardy's fault. That's not the Cowboys' fault. It happened. It happened. We can't try him again. That's double jeopardy in normal court. You can't do that. You can't try someone again when new evidence comes out. The NFL saw these pictures, and they only suspended him the amount of time they did. If they go back and suspend him more, that's just hypocritical. That's like saying, oh, we saw the pictures, but we didn't really take a good look at them, We know what he did. We know what he did. And the biggest issue in all of it is that Greg Hardy has never been apologetic about it until this morning when he tweeted out that he is apologetic about it. Literally happened this morning. Or yesterday. I saw Darren Rovell tweeted about it. And so, to have the insensitivity to kind of joke about it a little bit in when you're asked by the media, and then a couple weeks later to just like randomly throw out a tweet that you're apologetic, doesn't really make sense. I think that's where the problem is. When you look at a guy like Michael Vick, who very opposite things, beating a woman in domestic abuse is very different than killing dogs and, using dogs for fighting. But Michael Vick has never been more apologetic in his life than about what he did to those dogs. I mean, he understands now what he did, and it just doesn't seem like Greg Hardy took the time to get it. Whereas a guy like Brandon Marshall even, went out and sought help for mental illness and is now one of the forefront speakers on mental illness. So I think it's the lack of caring or showing empathy for the situation or what you've done, or at least, being able to be apologetic and realize what you did was wrong is the issue. When it comes to Jerry Jones, I mean, I can't, everyone wants to fault the guy, and I just can't do it because, the punishment was handed down, and he said, Greg, I'm sure sometime he said, Greg, if you ever do this again, we can't keep you on the team, but we'd like to give you a chance. And I'm a firm believer that everyone deserves second chances. There's not a whole lot you can do in my eyes that you don't deserve a second chance, as long as the crime befits the punishment, or the punishment fits the crime, and you've served your punishment. You should be given every second chance in the world.
Right.
So it's an interesting situation. I don't think Jerry Jones is at fault, and to say, well, look, he yelled at a special teams coach, so Jerry Jones should fire him or should get rid of him because obviously he's still trouble. I mean, yelling at a special teams coach during a game and beating your then girlfriend are two different things to, be about. Those aren't, I don't know if those are necessarily, relatable in the sense maybe like some other things would be. But leave Greg Hardy alone. That's how I feel about it. He's just trying to get his life back. Not a very bright kid. Probably hasn't had to be for a lot of time in his life. I mean, when you're a superstar athlete, there's just not a lot of, checks and balances on your decisions. You kind of can get away with more things, and it's not that he got away with this. I mean, the ex-girlfriend stopped cooperating with police, and so he never got charged formally in court. There's people believe they settled out of court for a certain amount of money, which if that's all she wanted, then that's fine. And if she didn't want to see him go to jail, then that's fine. And he paid whatever punishment for the crime, and it got resolved. He missed an entire year of football and a couple games this year, and you got to give him more of a sample size than a couple of games during a season for him to redeem himself. And I don't know. This could become a story where he makes good on it. It could be a story where he doesn't. But I just don't think the idea that these pictures recently came out, if you can't read what happened all that time ago and say, yeah, she was going to be pretty bruised up, that's your fault. That's not Greg Hardy's fault or the NFL's fault. Just because the pictures came out doesn't mean it's that much worse. It just means you weren't thinking about it. Like threw her by her throat onto a bed of assault rifles. You thought she was going to be unscathed in all of this. That's just naive to me, and I just don't agree with people who say, well, the pictures came out, so we got to suspend him again. It just doesn't work like that.
Well, so then my question to you then in response to that is, okay, then what is different then? How is this situation different from the Ray Rice situation?
Well, I mean, it was the timeliness of it. That, and you actually had the video of him striking his wife. The other issue is, Ray Rice was a declining running back who's now in his 30s, whereas Greg Hardy was an inclining, on his ascending defensive end, hardly to 28, but when it happened. And so you could play defensive end until you're 36. You can't really do that with running back. And Ray Rice, the biggest issue with him was he only ran for like 680 yards the season before he got kicked out of the league for punching his fiance. He didn't have a good year the year before it, and people thought he was on the decline, and then that happened, and he hasn't been in the league since. But Greg Hardy, talent will always, if you have talent, you can get away with a lot more things. It's just the way, unfortunately, the way it works. The more talent you have, the more you can get away with in life. So I think it's a combo of the position they play, where they were at in their career, and the fact it's really tough. I mean, you can see the bruises on her body, but there could still be the 1% of your brain that's like, maybe he didn't do it. Maybe someone else did, and she just blamed. You just don't know. Whereas when you see Ray Rice punch his girlfriend in the face, it's pretty obvious who did it. There's no miscalculation that can be done. It's that happened. All
right, interesting stuff. Doug Lowery joining us. Before we let you go, Doug, and finally with the Cowboys, you wanted to talk about Joseph Randle getting released by the Cowboys as well. More Cowboy incidents that continue to mount up. Of course, there's also Dez Bryant, but Dez Bryant is Dez Bryant, and that's basically that's it with that. So
isn't that the second perfect case on the same team of whenever you have talent, you can get away with a lot more things. And Dez Bryant,
pretty much
extremely talented, they let him get away with a lot.
Yeah. Your thoughts, though, with the Joseph Randle situation getting released earlier in the week, I believe, or last week?
I'm curious what's going on with that. And so someone's going to get him to talk eventually, but to go from a 3-touchdown Monday night game maybe 2 weeks before, and then all of a sudden you had one bad game where you fumbled, and you're missing practices, and you're not caring about going to practice. You're telling the team, screw you guys, I don't want to be there. And then 2 days later, you're released. It's a concerning thing going on. I mean, similar things happened with Jeremiah Ratliff in Chicago a couple weeks ago. Came into the facility, was threatening the administration or the staff there and the personnel people there and their kids and just weird stuff going on. You know, this is the stuff with head injuries that just sometimes worries me, and it's very interesting. I don't know. Randle was kind of a lost soul for a long time there at Oklahoma State. I know he got in trouble. He got in trouble before that. So you'd like to see the pattern end and him make good on some things, but it's just concerning to see things like that because he is a talented kid, and man, there's times where you wish you were a fly on the wall of things going on. I'll never forget. It was like the last week of Hard Knocks over the summer when they were doing the training camp show, and that same week, like the day that the cuts were made and that episode came out, Fred Jackson got cut by the Buffalo Bills. Fred Jackson had been there for like 8 or 9 years, just very dependable running back, has an amazing backstory. And I thought to myself, I would trade almost anything in the world to have just had a camera in the room when Rex Ryan had to tell Fred Jackson he was cut, because it doesn't seem fair, and I don't know how you tell a grown man he hasn't done enough when he's done everything he can. So just more moments where I'd love to be a fly on the wall in NFL offices.
Absolutely. Doug Lowery, before I let you go, Doug, your thoughts on the Bears here going into this actually, I guess we're midway through the season now. Your thoughts on those Bears?
Well, I see a lot of similarities with the Bears and the Huskers. The defensive backs aren't playing well. They're still figuring out the front seven with the linebackers and the D linemen. The offense has potential with guys who have been around, but people keep getting hurt, and the running game isn't really getting started up the way it should. I mean, it's very, very similar things going on. They both brought in a coach who's been around the block a couple of times. I see a lot of similarities. The Bears are just, they're a good draft class, and some. I mean, they have $60 million in free agents, or $58 million in free agency this year, and quite a few draft picks. I think they're about a year away, but I think they can give some people some trouble still throughout the end of the season. It's going to be interesting to watch it, but as far as Monday goes, the way, after San Diego, I should say, hung with Packers for 4 quarters a couple weeks ago, I don't know if I give the Bears much of a shot this Monday.
Oh, it's okay, Doug. Again, sometimes you just have to drop your expectations in the first season with a new head coach and look for the positives that come from the
Absolutely.
season.
Ryan, I haven't gotten to talk to you since the MLB went to the playoffs, but I don't know how I can congratulate you on this. Congrats to the Cubs this year.
Thank you, sir.
Because I poked a lot of fun at the Cubs, but I was actually kind of hoping they would.
I was too.
There comes a time where it's I know a lot of people I know and love would be very, very happy to see that happen. So,
well, you know what I said though. I've been saying it for the last 2 years now.
It's going to be about a year.
2016 is the year, and I said that at the beginning. I think at the end of 2013. I said that at the end of 2014, and once again at the end of this year. It just feels like, and still does to this point, 2016 is going to be the year. I don't know why, I don't know how. It has felt that way ever since for the last 2 years now for me.
Because that would make it 110 years, right?
I think no, it'll be 109. I think it'd be 109.
Okay.
When 2016 ends, it will be officially 109. But it will be 100 years officially that Wrigley has been the home of the Cubs.
Right.
So, it's just, it's all, I feel like it's all coming together here.
Absolutely, brother.
We'll see what happens. Doug Lowery, he works for News Channel Nebraska, as well as he does some radio work for Wayne, a radio station in Wayne, Nebraska. But we always know Doug Lowery as the guy who came up with the idea of the KRNU NFL Draft Show, and he will always be famous for that thing in particular. A lot of good memories with Doug, and my friend, it is glad to have you on the podcast today, my friend.
Absolutely, man. It was a pleasure. Be good.
I will, absolutely. Doug Lowery joining us. Always, as I said, great stuff from Douglas Lowery.
You're listening to The Route, a sports talk podcast. On Facebook.com/TheRoute2 and on Twitter @the_Route2.
All right, so big thanks to Doug Lowery for joining me. And this is pretty much the point of the show where we've reached just about the end of the show. Again, not wanting to really carry on much of anything else in the show without Brent here because there's a lot to talk about. Unfortunately, it kind of takes two to tango here unless you're Colin Cowherd. So basically, we got predictions here. But before we get to that, just wanted to remind you all, of course, tune in next week. I will have more than likely Brent back, and we will take a look at an interesting argument that we have had ever since it happened. Maybe I think we're closing in on about a year ago, actually, since this incident took place. And the subject of what we will discuss in Brent's featured segment, that's what's really going on with Brent Bonfleur, the Jack Gangwish argument. Brent Bonfleur does not like Jack Gangwish. I honestly think there's nothing wrong with him. I think he's a great leader. He's fired up all the time. But Brent Bonfleur has his reasons as to why Jack Gangwish is not who you think he is, even though he has no record outside of the one incident that he has. So we'll discuss that at great length, I can only imagine, on next week's show. Huskers are on the road to take on Rutgers, as we mentioned with Doug Lowery. So no Devin Cleach, more than likely. We might have him, we might not. Hoping for that as well. But we are going to try and get a Husker Football podcast next week. But as I said, don't hold your breath on that. Predictions for the week, not too many. We got 3 in college football, 2 in the NFL. And we'll start with the NFL this week. Since I'm here, Brent's not. I'm the only one doing predictions for this week. And in the NFL, I thought, why not with the Vikings and the Raiders? Both teams are above 500. Vikings are 5-2 and a very underrated team. And I have them going into Oakland and just escaping the Raiders. I think they are not quite fully there as a complete unit, but they're very close. I think the Vikings are there as a complete unit. They just got to start rolling with the confidence that they know they have. They just really, I don't think, fully have a grasp on it yet, and I think this game against the Raiders will help them with that. So I've got the Vikings defeating the Raiders next Sunday. Cardinals and Seahawks. I'm going with the Cardinals because it just sticks out in my mind so vividly. Carson Palmer and the Arizona Cardinals a couple of years back went up to Seattle and they won. At a time in which the Seahawks were on their way to winning a Super Bowl, they beat Seattle in Seattle at CenturyLink Field, which is almost impossible to win at. So I think if Carson Palmer and the Cardinals, if they can do it once, they can definitely do it again. So I'm going with Arizona next Sunday. That's a primetime game as well. In college football, Alabama, Mississippi State. This should be a really good one. I believe we can expect the second-ranked Alabama Crimson Tide will be taking on Mississippi State. I've got Alabama in not as close of a game as we may all think, but it's still going to be a Bama victory. Roll Tide all the way and continue to hold a top 4 spot in the college football playoff. Memphis and Houston. This is a really good one. I was very saddened to see that Memphis lost to Houston last night. I really like Memphis. I really think Justin Fuente has done an outstanding job with that program. And their quarterback, Paxton, he is definitely an NFL-worthy quarterback, and I really hope that ends up being the case for him. He's tall, he's mobile, he's got a cannon for an arm, and he's very alert, especially under pressure in the pocket. So look for Paxton to have hopefully a very successful NFL career if he makes it that far. But for this game in general, Memphis and Houston, I'm going with Houston. They're the home team. They're coming off of another solid victory, a game that they just escaped, actually. And so I'm going with Houston defeating Memphis. I'm sorry, Memphis. I love you guys. Finally, Oklahoma and Baylor, and I'm going with the upset. I think Oklahoma is not as vulnerable at the quarterback position as Baylor is. This is just the point of the season where these Big 12 games get bigger and bigger and bigger, and they mean so much more. And I think that's just too much pressure on a freshman quarterback. I think Oklahoma has not been taken seriously this year. They're flying under the radar. They like that. All teams do. And I've got the Sooners going down to Waco and getting the victory against the Baylor Bears on Saturday. And that should be a really, really good game. I'm certainly looking forward to watching that one. And that is going to do it for the podcast, solo style, except for when Doug Lowery was on. And a big thanks to Doug Lowery for joining me. We'll see you next week. Be sure to check out some of our old shows if you want, as well as our Facebook and Twitter feeds, facebook.com/theroute2, at @the_route2 on Twitter. And of course, if you've missed a show or any other podcast, Husker football or baseball related, be sure to head over to our website, theroute2.wordpress.com. In hopefully 2 weeks, looking at having Matt Rigby and Michael Dixon on for another baseball podcast to discuss the postseason and the offseason that lies ahead. For now, I'm Ryan Swanigan. We'll see you next week. Brent Bonfuller will join me then. For now, enjoy the week in sports.